Hello again, it's Jonathan at the Piano Lesson. And I thought I'd kind of pick up where I left off last week with Charlie Parker's Au Prévove and try to help with some improvisation ideas and how to kind of get deep into the piece rather than just playing it superficially. And then I thought I might do something similar with some more daunting pieces like ornithology, which I haven't particularly played very much. I've played on occasion, but really learning it in depth and learning it from the standpoint of the person who wrote it, because the person who wrote a piece of music, they typically don't write a piece of music from beginning to end precisely the same way that the piece was published. There's a lot of struggling that goes on and experimentation. And I think if you don't, if you aren't willing or you don't enjoy experimentation, or you're not curious, you have to have a little curiosity about the piece, but kind of seeing its bits and pieces, and you have to like tinkering, really. If you're just a person that wants to get in the car and drive to the grocery store, that's fine. But if you kind of want to know what's under the hood and mess around a little bit, that's more where I'm at. There's a lot of things to think about, you can well imagine, when you're playing an instrument. And there's a lot of things to teach when you're teaching someone to play an instrument. And what you really want to get from a teacher is you want to find someone that's going to be able to present information in a way that makes it manageable. That's where the information is broken down. And beyond a few, again, superficial ways to do that, for instance, learning the left hand alone, the right hand alone, then putting both together. I mean, that's sort of one typical method of doing things, but there's a lot more to it than that. And if that's all you do, then learning music is going to be real hard. And I wanted to make a point of, wanted to share with you a story of a YouTube video I saw recently. I spend way too much time on YouTube probably, but it was some flight instruction. I've never flown a plane, but of course the titles are always to sort of suck you in, and the pilot said, the secrets that you'll never learn, etc., etc. But he was talking about his flight students and how people were having a real hard time learning to land a plane. And he had devised a way where people could learn much more quickly and efficiently and more safely, of course, because it's one thing to learn how to play the piano, nothing bad's going to happen other than playing a wrong note. I mean, you're not going to break a finger or anything, but if you're landing a plane, that's, there's some issues. So that, I wouldn't want to be a flight instructor in a real airplane, or a driving instructor for that matter. But on a plane, as I understand it, there's various axes that you have to manage while you're flying. There's the front to back, and then there's the side to side, right? And there's, all of the variations of that. And there are controls in the aircraft that you use. There's a stick or a wheel that you pull back on or turn, and then there's ailerons, there's pedals that you have to pedal at the same time. And essentially what he would do is he saw that his students really they failed because they couldn't master basic aspects of flying. So what he would do, for instance, and he would just manage the foot pedals while they were managing the stick. And then he would flip that. He would say, well, now you manage the pedals and I'll manage the stick, right? So they could just focus on one aspect and breaking it down in that manner. And that's kind of what you have to do when you learn a piece of music. There's a well-known piece, the Satie Gymnopédie. And Satie's music, if you haven't heard it before, is quite unique and can appear to be a little obtuse. I don't know. It's a little strange to understand. And when I hear that piece played, I don't particularly agree with the way people play it most of the time. It tends to be very one-dimensional, and there needs to be more management of the various aspects of a piece of music. Pretty much every piece of music, no matter what you play, is going to make the same demands on a musician to a lesser or more of an extent. And I've talked about some of these in my previous videos. This goes beyond rote learning. This goes beyond mechanical learning. These are the various parameters that one has to consider to formulate a plan, some kind of plan of attack. You know, if you're an improviser, you have to practice improvising. It's not, you know, it's not that we don't practice and we don't have plans. It's just that we can change the plan in midstream if we want, and we can change the plan to a greater extent than one would typically do in a piece of classical music, because you can also change the notes to a large extent. But those aspects are there's basically 5 of them. There's the dynamic shape of a piece. So how one manages dynamics, let's say over the course of 4 measures, starting loud and getting softer. Let's say that's a decrescendo. Okay, in general, a decrescendo. And you have to predetermine the extent of the decrescendo. Are you starting forte or mezzo forte or piano? You know, what are you starting, and then how are you ending? So you're starting pianissimo, you're starting forte and ending pianissimo. What is it precisely? Because if you don't have those absolute markings, the relative markings are going to be meaningless. But that's the dynamic shape. And to me, that's more important in many ways to create a musical phrase than the actual notes themselves. There's the rhythmic shape. So by rhythmic shape, I mean the manner in which the musical phrase reveals itself in the music, aside from the mechanics of the bar lines. If you're playing a piece with 3 beats in the measure, I can pretty much guarantee that the musical phrase is not going to start on count 1 and end on count 3. That's not that common. Usually the musical phrase is going to say start on count 1 and start on count 2 and then end on count 1 of the next measure. 2 instead of 1, 2, 3, it'll be 1, 2, 3, 1. Right? So that's the rhythmic shape, and those little rhythmic shapes are like puzzle pieces, different than the word rhythm, which is just a mechanical description of what notes you're using: quarter note, eighth note, whole note, quarter rest, whatever that is, because it's how those notes are emphasized. And the rhythmic shape and the dynamic shape go hand in glove. They really go together. It's hard to separate them. And then you have the dynamic balance. So again, the use of dynamics, but particularly when we're playing piano. If you play the piano where all of the notes are the same dynamic in the bass and in the treble throughout the whole piece, you're not going to be bringing out the counterpoint of the piece. So again, when you're playing the piano really is an orchestra. And so you want to be able to hear the bass lines, the melodic lines, the accompaniments, all of those things kind of carved out, and different composers prioritize that in different ways. And you can make kind of gross generalizations about how they should be performed, I suppose. And there are categories of music, and you can, in different periods of music, and people have certain conventions as to how that's played. But really, the 2 big overarching grab bags of musical styles, one might talk about polyphony and homophony. So polyphony meaning something that's polyphonic, where you have more than one melodic line at a time, and both melodic lines are effectively equal, although they might kind of dovetail, they might be prominent in a moment, and then another one will sort of be prominent, almost like a rope, kind of like a twine, kind of something that's intertwined, or a helix, or whatever you want to call it. And then the homophonic music, where you have a very clearly defined melodic line and a more subdued accompaniment, although that accompaniment really does contain its own polyphony, and that has to be respected. And whenever you're playing a piece of polyphonic music, you want to bring out the homophony to the extent that it's possible. And whenever you're playing a homophonic piece, you want to bring out the polyphony to the extent that it's possible. So those are three things: dynamic shape, rhythmic shape, dynamic balance. And then, unique to the piano, you have pedaling. So having the capacity to be able to pedal every note, no matter what, so that you have that facility. You may not use it, but in my estimation, it's better to pedal too much than too little. Why do you use the pedal? Well, primarily on a piano, you use the pedal to make the tone more beautiful, to have this sympathetic overtones from the strings. Yes, the pedal can sustain notes, and sometimes people call the right pedal on the piano the sustain pedal, or sometimes they call it the loud pedal, but its proper name is the damper pedal. And to damp, not dampen, but to damp the sound, to damp the strings, to quiet them down, you essentially want to have that pedal down all the time, and then you're constantly sort of blotting away, quieting the strings of the unwanted, the artifacts that, or the unwanted sound from the prior notes that are being played. And you might pedal more frequently or less frequently. But those are critical things. And that's how you formulate a plan. And if you're just playing the piece, sort of kind of winging it and hoping for the best, or trying to copy someone, you're only going to get so far in playing that piece. There was one other aspect I wanted to address. Let's see. I had the dynamic balance. I had the rhythmic shape, the dynamic shape. I had the pedaling. I think there was one other aspect that'll come to me. But that becomes like readily apparent when you start to play pieces of music, like, as an example, the Satie, like the Gymnopédie. A lot of these pieces just sort of fall flat unless you incorporate some of that. And I'll kind of show you what I mean. So the introduction. Why don't I do this? Oh, what happened there? Well, I'm just gonna oh, I know why that happened. I'm gonna just see if I can get my other camera going here for a second, and I think I can in the middle of this. Let's just see here. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Okay. There we go. Okay, you plug stuff in, you take stuff out. I would have to stop this. Well, I'm not gonna, I don't think it matters really. So here we go. You have the bass line. Now, that's kind of how we're used to hearing it. That's not wrong necessarily, but it's just very one-dimensional. So you have 4 measures of introduction, and I think the 4 measures of introduction should be distinct from the rest of the piece. And one way I would distinguish them is perhaps I would start louder and diminuendo. So the dynamic shape of those four measures would be, let's say, to start louder, and get softer. I'm just doing this in a very kind of primitive way right now, and then it's soft, and then come in with the melody. All right, so that's very homophonic. You really hear the melody clearly, and the accompaniment is behind the melody. Now, there's the counterpoint of that. So there's the bass line, right? You have that in the bass, and you can find these scores online. They're all over the place, you know. But G, D, right? And then you have the chord, and that to me sounds very flat. There's a hidden counterpoint in there. So there's this top line, right? There's this bottom line, and then there's this middle line. Now I could choose to bring out any of those. I could bring out the top line, listen. All right, I could bring out the bottom line. So that's louder. That's called voicing a chord. And typically that's really what you want to do when you play the piano. You don't really want to play everything the same way, because it's easier to hear into the chord, hear into the piano. So even if a piece of music might say, in this case it says pianissimo, it just happens to be marked pianissimo. I don't even know that that's the right marking. But you want to always have at least three dynamics going at once. That's what we're calling the dynamic balance in just the balance within the counterpoint. Here's the middle voice. Again, the lower voice. Almost sounds like a totally different chord, upper voice. And I always hold down the pedal first. So I never play a chord and then hold the pedal down. I never do that. And I certainly, if you're playing the pedal, you never want to hear the inside of the piano. You never want to hear the mechanism. You want to move it as little as possible and use an economy of motion when you're pedaling. And every piano is different. So the chord almost sounds completely different when you voice the chord differently, whether you're voicing the middle note. Now, how do you do that? Well, you put more weight on the note that you want to voice, and you play lighter and more shallow on the other notes. And it always helps to kind of push in sometimes to do this, almost like you're landing an airplane again. But you can kind of manage the pianissimo a little better when you're using the arm, as opposed to trying to control the key vertically. It's much more difficult to do that. So it might sound like this, right? Or this, or this, right? Or you can have a cascade of effects. So I'm connecting. And over the bar line, right, that chord, when you play, when the melody comes in, that chord, the lower note is B. So I've carved out, just out of imagination, right, using dynamics, I've carved out a counterpoint, a melodic line. And the melodic line is this: D, C sharp, B, A, B. And it sounds like it resolves there. Yes, literally in the music, you'll find chord arrests in between. Nah, you know, I don't know what to say. I'm going to take a little liberty there and kind of try to connect them. I think it's in the interest of the piece. Maybe disconnecting the other notes. I don't know. Holding down that middle note. If I have to top note is the same. You can experiment a bit. This is the jazz part of it, right? It's a little bit of I don't know. I mean, the composer's dead. It's your piece, so you can do what you want with it, as long as you don't, have fruit thrown at you in the concert. But that's part of the idea. So now I have this dynamic shape, starting louder, getting softer. I have the rhythmic shape. The rhythmic shape in this instance is since the piece is in 3, it's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. That's really the rhythmic shape. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1 here. Even though the meter is in 3, and typically you would accent on count 1, and there is an accent in the bass on count 1, right? But I'm going to de-emphasize it. And it's already de-emphasized in a sense. It's already kind of written that way. So when the melody comes in, you have a clear demarcation between the introduction and the melody. And I'm taking some liberties with fingering. Typically that part is played left, right, because the stems are down and the left hand up and the right hand. You don't have to do that. I mean, we do it because it's maybe a little more practical, but I'm at the last one, I'm probably going to I'm probably going to use my left hand to play that chord, because I have to play this melody all up here. Right? Now, where does that phrase end? Often people think it ends on that A. I don't think it ends on the A. I think it ends on the F sharp, and it's a real long note, and it's repeated in the chord. And it almost sounds like a pleading, it has that pleading quality to it. Another aspect is in this sort of dynamic shape is a default position is to crescendo when the line is descending. There's a practical reason and a musical reason. The practical reason is that it's easier to get tone from lower notes and higher notes than to force that short string to speak, and potentially you might require more physicality to do that. The other thing is that musically, when you crescendo, when you descend, and you decrescendo, or get softer when you ascend, the music becomes a bit demure, a little more poetic. If you crescendo as you're ascending, the music becomes a little more heroic. And it's easy to paint oneself into a corner in terms of phrasing, because you've already climaxed. What was the last thing? Thank you very much. The form of the piece, that's the other aspect of the 5 aspects. So the overall form of the piece. So what are those aspects? Well, what are the phrases? 4 measure phrases plus 4 measure phrases. 1, 2, 3, da, da, dee, da, da. That's 4 measures. And then you have the F sharp, ba, another 4 measures. So it kind of comes in 4 measure packages. But the overarching piece, where is the high point? Where is the low point? Planning on that so your fortes aren't too loud for when you really need them, right? And then you've already peaked too early in the piece. So those are really the 5 elements, kind of the 5 keys to the kingdom. And I could also vary, that internal counterpoint. I could start on the lower one the second time, or so I could go up. That's another example of creativity. What we're doing now is we're improvising in a sense, right? So improvising in the the most, in the largest sense of the word, improvising, meaning we're just taking a simple idea and we're trying to look at a piece of music in a variety of ways. So instead of these flat chords, right, we have we're voicing the chord, right? Voicing the middle note, voicing the lower note, creating a melodic line, you know, and dee da 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 da, or dee da 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 da. What did I do before? Yeah. Da, 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 da. That's another way of looking at it. And so now, in terms of dynamics, what do you have? You have, let's say, the bass. And the bass is, say, mezzo forte. So there's that bass idea, right? There's the melody idea, and then there's the kind of the inner chordal idea, let's say, right? So let's say that the bass is like mezzo piano, between mezzo piano and mezzo forte maybe. The middle idea is maybe more like mezzo forte, forte, but mezzo forte, and then the melody is definitely forte. So you have 3 levels of dynamics. That's your dynamic balance, okay? And you're aware of your form measures, right? And also, again, I'm crescendoing going down, and then it's a long note. I'm going to really play that, really kind of sock that one because it's such a long, it has to sustain. Each time I play that again, I could play it a little louder or a little softer, you know, depending on what I want to achieve in the piece. Okay, so I said I was going to do Au Prévert some more, and my intention was, I really don't have time to do it today, but my intention was to take little bits of the piece and extrapolate that, kind of reiterate that over the different chords. So you have the first phrase, you can do that in B flat, or transpose it. For the, you know. So I'm trying to do too much in one day, but that's it for now. This is Jonathan, the Piano Lesson. Thank you all for watching, all my friends out there, and my buddy Francesco, and we'll see you another time. Bye-bye.